And we are live on YouTube.
Great. So this is a special meeting of council, which is being held on Thursday, June 9th. And as we traditionally do, the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this is a reminder of great standard of living and is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. And as this is Indigenous Peoples Month in Canada, it is fitting that we have the land acknowledgement in all of our meetings that we conduct here at the City of St. Catharines. So there are no amendments to this evening's agenda, as it is an education session. So I need a mover and a second to adopt the agenda. Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Kushner. All in favor? That's carried. Any conflicts of interest? I don't think there would be, because this is again an education session. So we need a motion to waive rules of debate. That in order to adopt a workshop style to allow council to engage in open discussion, that council will suspend Rule 4 from council's procedural bylaw to permit members to speak more than once. And again, I'll need a motion for this. Councillor Phillips, second by Councillor Dodge. All in favor? That's carried. So really the workshop that we're undertaking is going to be opened up by the Director of Economic Development, Brian York, and then he'll be turning it over to the consultants. We will go into a closed session, and that'll be for a further discussion on related matters to the items that we're going to be discussing. So in terms of, I'll turn it over now to our Economic Development Director, Brian York.
Thanks. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As directed, staff have retained the consulting services or urban metrics to study and assess the need for and structure of a municipal land development corporation or other external entity to undertake strategic real estate functions to facilitate the sale or development of city-owned lands. Tonight, we are joined by two members of the consulting team, Rowan Faluti and Tywin Thomas, who will spend the next 45 minutes taking us through a workshop session as part of their ongoing work plan of deliverables. Following which they'll report back to council on a recommendation forward. Over to you, Tywin and Rowan.
All right, thank you, Brian. So we have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to be putting together, but just before we get into that, I think we've had an opportunity to meet with most of you, and I think you know a little bit about Urban Metrics, but we're an urban economic firm. We've been in business since 1947 and under various ownerships through PricewaterhouseCoopers and Coopers and Lybrand in 2004. The partners established Urban Metrics as an independent firm. We do a lot of work with municipal development corporations and municipal development entities such as Creatio and Waterfront Toronto, and recently we undertook a similar exercise as this for the city of Burlington to assist them in developing their own municipal development entity. Tywin, are you sharing the screen? Are you able to share the screen? Okay, so the agenda today, we'll talk a little bit about the work we've done today, but more specifically, we'll get into an understanding of what is a municipal development corporation and a municipal development entity. We'll take you through some examples and kind of really understand, whether or not this is the right thing for Burlington, or sorry, for St. Catharines, sorry. So to date, we've undertaken a considerable amount of background research and analysis looking at the demographics of St. Catharines, looking at residential housing market, commercial real estate market. We've done quite a number of case studies on other municipal development corporations. We've done a fairly extensive policy review. We've undertaken a large number of stakeholder interviews, and we've looked at the potential real estate opportunities in the city of St. Catharines. Okay. So when we talk about a municipal development corporation, I think when we spoke with most of you, I think we preferred to call it more or less a municipal development entity, because it doesn't have to be a full scale corporation, which is identified and created by the Municipal Act under Section 203(1). And it refers to a municipal entity that undertakes aspects of development on behalf of the city. And in order to undertake or to establish a municipal development corporation, it requires the preparation of a business case and public engagement, but prior to creating it. Okay, Tywin. So why create a municipal development corporation or another form of municipal development entity? And we'll be talking about what the various types of municipal development entities are in a minute. But the reason why municipalities do it is it provides a separation between planning and approval and actual development. It provides an opportunity to fast track developments that are of interest to a municipality. It provides a degree of autonomy so that it's not necessarily tied to individual political cycles, so that it can operate to some extent outside of the election cycles. It provides potentially more options to generate capital, particularly for complex projects that may involve heritage restoration. It provides an opportunity to leverage the private sector in a form of a partnership. It provides an opportunity to gain additional control over strategic development initiatives. And one of the key things is it really has an opportunity to bring in expertise that may not necessarily be available in the municipal sector. Okay, Tywin. So some mandates, and I think we've spoken to most of you in terms of what you would like to see accomplished by a municipal development entity. I mean, certainly one of the the key objectives might be to generate revenues from surplus lands, but it may also be to deliver public realm and infrastructure improvements, particularly where you may have complex development sites. So, for example, there may be an opportunity to integrate a community center within a residential building and be able to defray the costs of that project. Potentially deliver municipal service facilities on existing sites at lower cost to the taxpayer because you are doing a potential partnership with a private developer. And we're also seeing some municipal development entities such as Create TO getting more involved in market housing and affordable housing, and particularly opportunity for low-income housing. Okay, so I'm going to turn the podium or the virtual podium back to Tywin, who's going to talk about some of the case studies we've done and kind of how municipal development entities kind of work in the context of more of a continuum.
Yes, so as Rowan said, this visualization represents a two-dimensional continuum rather than a straight line. It kind of shows the variety of different entities and municipalities based on their own approach to strategic real estate projects. So autonomy refers to the degree of separation from the municipality itself, and project involvement refers to how many stages of the development process an entity is involved in and to what degree. So, for example, the City of Waterloo utilizes its own internal planning and economic development departments to oversee projects and works extensively with consultants and the Regional Economic Development Corporation. The city of Hamilton takes a similar approach, but kind of creates an internal entity to manage specific projects within that municipal structure, whereas on the kind of opposite end of the scale, Waterfront Toronto and CMLC, which is Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, they have a wide range of internal functions themselves and complete a significant amount of the pre and post construction stages themselves internally. So we're going to go through several of these examples in a little bit more detail. So as Rowan mentioned, Creatio is the first one we're going to go into, and Creatio is an agency of the City of Toronto, which is a structure that you will all be familiar with. It has a broad mandate, which is basically just to manage the city's property. It acts as the reference point and a gatekeeper for any issues or initiatives related to the city's real estate assets. So also, as Rowan mentioned, right now it's playing a key role in the city's Housing Now strategy, which is seeking to build hundreds of units kind of annually over the next few years. And it also works in conjunction with other entities like Waterfront Toronto. So the example that's shown on this slide is an example that's currently being undertaken in downtown Toronto, which is a private partnership with a developer who owns a parcel that was adjacent to an existing fire station. And the concept was to relocate and modernize the fire station at no cost to fire services, as well as create a new two-bay medical services station in the podium of the building. It also was to create a public promenade and 10,000 square feet of community space, and it provides 848 rental units, 30% of which are affordable for 99 years. And Creatio itself is funded through the annual budget process as an agency. Their 2022 base operating budget is quite significant at 16.33 million gross, but all of these costs are accounted for during the budget process, so its net impact is $0. Now, on the opposite end of the scale, and another example that came up during some of my conversations with you, is Midland Bay Landing. Midland created a development corporation specifically to undertake a waterfront revitalization project. It's quite a large project in Midland scale, a 40-acre transformation of what was an industrial site into a mixed-use community, and kind of one of the last opportunities to provide public access to the waterfront. It's managed by a 7-member board that includes the mayor and the deputy mayor, and it manages the planning, the public engagement, and the RFP and queue process to identify and partner with a developer. Their financing model is very different from an entity like Creatio. It's also funded through the annual budget process, but it draws on a dedicated reserve fund. Its 2022 budget note was at $277,000. And the expected balance of that reserve fund at the end of the year is a deficit of $4.6 million. So the goal is to, upon the sale of this site, which is owned by the development corporation, which is owned by the municipality, to net more than 4.6 million and eventually come out with a profit. Oakville MDC, which is again an example that was cited by many of you during our conversations, has a very similar mandate to engage in projects that are similar to those that the city of St Catharines has undertaken already. So its mandate is to create value by selling or planning the development of underutilized or surplus sites. So these involve liaising with the town's planning and development departments and making sure that any site sales conform to those municipal goals. It kind of is less involved in the construction and post-construction process, but undertakes the preliminary planning and development activities. It also negotiates financial terms with those developers outside of the RFP process, which gives a little bit more leeway to reach a deal that is acceptable in the market without having to take that deal back to council necessarily every single time. It is also governed by a 7-member board, which includes the mayor and the CAO. So there is a significant degree of oversight. In terms of its financing model, it receives about $700,000 annually in the form of a promissory note from the tax stabilization reserve that is justified through annual reporting every year. Since its inception in 2018, it's facilitated about $16.8 million in land sales. and it pays back the debt that's created by the issuing of those promissory notes through management fees associated with those land sales. Again, a quite different example is we're trying to demonstrate the kind of whole gambit and that continuum of opportunities and entities is the Edmonton Community Development Company. So this is a unique example in that it was created through a municipal plan to address poverty, but is not owned by the municipality. The city contributes approximately $250,000 annually, but this is kind of non-guaranteed, and it comes through a variety of different grant and subsidy programs that are different every year. It leverages funding from the city, but as well as the Edmonton Community Foundation is one of the largest contributors. And its goal is slightly different in that it seeks to purchase assets for the community to provide economic opportunity in areas that are disadvantaged economically. So it has 3 full-time staff, similar to many smaller charitable organizations, and it's governed by a volunteer board and an executive director. It was also gifted or conveyed millions in property by the city of Edmonton, much of which was in the form of either vacant or derelict properties that the city would have had to pay to demolish and then maintain. So the Edmonton CDC kind of took on that role in exchange for the value of those properties. Next is another kind of large and more fulsome example of an external corporation, which is the Calgary Municipal Land Corporation. The particularly interesting thing about CMLC, as it's called, is that it is funded through what's called the Community Revitalization Levy, which is a form of tax increment financing. So how that works is that the city of Calgary continues to collect property taxes based on the assessed values of the property at the time the properties were conveyed to CMLC. But any gains that result from increases in CMLC's actions flow directly to the development corporation. So there's a direct incentive for the development corporation to create more property tax revenue because that funds their own operations. And they've undertaken a wide range of projects from heritage restoration, such as the top picture, to a recently completed award-winning library, which is the kind of statement project that some people tend to associate with development corporations. And finally, we're going to look at the Burlington Lands Partnership, which was created to create a dedicated capacity to seek out, identify, and develop opportunities into viable projects. So there were kind of a full range of options considered by the city, and given the constraints financially at the time, as the kind of conception was at the start of COVID and there was a lot of municipal financial uncertainty, an internal strategic group was identified as most appropriate. And it also represents a transitional approach to build up organizational capacity and expertise within the city of Burlington, with one eye on potentially creating a more external development corporation in the future. Because it's internal to the existing city structure and to the Burlington Economic Development Corporation, it kind of has the least amount of financial resources given to it of the examples that we've been through, with approximately $250,000 a year through the budget process that actually flows to the Burlington Economic Development Corporation, which then presents in its budget allocated towards the lands partnership in terms of professional services and salaries and benefits for, I believe it's currently 2 full-time employees.
Okay, thank you, Tywin. So in terms of the order of magnitude of costs, I mean, they vary significantly depending on the scale of the municipal development entity. But they usually require some sort of seed money. So in the case of Burlington, it was as little as $250,000. And typically over time, they get to the point where the operating expenses are relatively minor or zero, depending on the extent of land sales. Although what we did see in the case of Midland, where it's taken longer than projected to get to the point where they can sell the land, there is a longer than expected commitment in terms of having to fund the development corporation. But from other examples, once they are up and running and the lands are available to be disposed of, then that offsets most or all of the ongoing operational grants or expenses to the municipality. So identifying the right model, and this is something that we're very cognizant of, and when we've been doing the interviews with yourselves and other stakeholders, it's really very important that we get an understanding of what does the city want in terms of its objectives. Is it primarily interested in receiving revenue? Is it interested in affordable housing? Is it interested in creating great urban environments or landmark developments? So it's really important to kind of get an understanding of the objectives, and what are the opportunities, and how does the city see in terms of reaching those goals, what assets are available to the city, not only in terms of financial assets and the ability to undertake risk, but also in terms of the staff, the total staff that might be available, and what sort of expertise the city have on site right now. And then what are the steps in terms of getting up and running, and what is the city comfortable with? Hey, Tywin? So in terms of some of the success factors that we kind of looked at in terms of starting up, and what's extremely important is to have a very clear mandate in terms of what the municipal development entity is intending to do. So again, that's why we were very cognizant of really understanding what sort of objectives such an entity needs to target in a St. Catharines model. The objectives need to be measurable and attainable. Potentially it could be X dollars from land sales every year, or for example, X number of affordable housing units every year. It has to have the ability to access financing, so that there has to be at least an initial commitment by council to provide to provide sufficient financing for it. It needs sufficient authority to execute its mandate, and there has to be a considerable transparency in public communication strategy. So even though it is operating to some extent outside of the arm's length of council, it still needs to be transparent, and so the public doesn't perceive it as working in secret. An internal project team, a dedicated project team with expertise and capacity. Again, when an MDC is underfunded, it invariably doesn't have the horsepower to do what it was intended to set out to do. Adequate provision of resources, and particularly this goes down to manpower or person power and expertise. Balances clear project ownership with interdepartmental coordination. Again, it can't be seen as a rogue organization. That still has to work in tandem with municipal departments. Particularly you see, for example, there has to be a strong relationship with planning and development and planning approvals and the organization. And there has to be some separation of applicant and approval responsibilities, so that it's still treated as though it were a third-party developer when it's making applications, so that the city doesn't give it preferential treatment. So there's that element to ensure that there's no conflict of interest. Okay. And success factors, for an external entity, so more of the municipal development corporation model, an ingrained process to maintain communication and accountability, sufficiently insulated from political cycles, Again, progress is measurable and demonstrable, and consistent source of revenue to maintain, improve operations. I know in terms of measurable and demonstrable, we were engaged by both Waterfront Toronto and Create TO, or at the time Build Toronto, to undertake annual reports to identify some of the economic and financial impacts of the organization. So, for example, how many residential units, how much commercial space was developed, what did that mean in terms of tax revenues, development charge revenues, as well as jobs, so that for both those organizations, we prepared a report identifying what the both the historic impacts were, as well as the projected impacts based on their land reserves. And then for an internal project team, so one working within the city, again, it needs consistent funding to maintain and improve operations. Again, there has to be strong interdepartmental communication and connectivity, so that you have, when you have an opportunity, that all of the right people can get together at the right time in order to make it happen. And then municipal exit strategy is top of mind, so that, if things don't work out, there's an opportunity to, vacate the project. Okay, Tywin. So why St. Catharines? And again, I mean, this was probably the first question that we asked ourselves when we got involved in this project. And as we went through the interviews and did our research, St. Catharines has a very good history of involvement in real estate development. It's now experiencing a changing economic and real estate market, so that there are very little greenfield land available in St. Catharines, and new development is, pretty much has to incur through intensification. And a lot of the city's potentially surplus sites are in very good locations for intensification development. St. Catharines is a leader within the region. It has the only urban growth center in Niagara region. It has a rich ecosystem of potential partners. It has a number of underutilized municipal assets, which we'll be talking about. And it also has, potential municipal real estate needs that can't be met under the current structure. So we've looked at some past municipal development strategies. Certainly the success stories. Certainly the Meridian Center is something that gets put forward as a success center in terms of downtown development and helping to anchor downtown revitalization. Certainly the Performing Arts Center, again, is another important project. It wasn't seen as successful as the Meridian Center, but again, it still became an important part in the arts and culture strategic plan for the downtown, and helping to revitalize the downtown area. So I'm going to turn things back to Tywin. He's going to talk about some of the current opportunities that exist right now.
So one of the themes that emerged not only in our research, but then when we started doing stakeholder interviews with some of the people that are here tonight, as well as with other stakeholders, were that there's quite a few examples of not only the successes that Rowan mentioned, but some opportunities where people felt that should have been taken or could have been taken, and that for a variety of reasons the city was not able to, or was not able to influence as significantly as some people might have liked. So some of those examples are the old General Hospital. There's the Ontario Street GM site that I'm sure we're all familiar with. And then there's the St. Catharines GO secondary plan area, which is expected to receive significantly more and more regular service than it has historically, and that itself is an opportunity. And then on the other side, there were some needs that came out of both our research and the interviews, including a fire training tower, the need to either divest from or find tenants in vacant municipally owned office space, the future expected need of a larger municipal services yard. And again, with no greenfield opportunities within the municipal boundaries, that complicates finding a parcel of land large enough to accommodate that. And then a variety of heritage buildings that many people felt could have been better utilized or could provide more value to the city and to the community. So there's also a few kind of general themes or challenges that emerged, and many of them are faced by municipalities throughout Ontario, and some are a little bit more unique to St. Catharines. So based on not only a policy such as the growth plan, which directs growth to the city of St. Catharines, but also recent trends that have become evident lately, their projected levels of population growth are beyond those that the city's experienced recently. And as we mentioned, the city is geographically constrained from pursuing the types of greenfield development patterns that many Ontario cities have pursued as their populations have grown over recent decades. And relating to that, there's a challenge of managing residential growth while ensuring that there's equitable economic opportunity and that employment lands which provide jobs for these residents are protected. Simultaneously, all of Ontario and much of Canada and North America finds itself navigating a housing affordability crisis, and St. Catharines is no different. And again, as mentioned, planning for and securing land for municipal uses in the future. As the population grows and as the world around us changes, those municipal uses are going to become either larger or different, and the city needs to be able to respond to that. Relating to that as well is guiding development in a way that it responds to climate changes and ensures resiliency in the face of extreme weather events, which have become more and more frequent and are expected to moving forward. In terms of opportunities, which are significant and counterbalance those challenges quite well, the city does have a limited supply of vacant properties, as many of you mentioned, but there's a variety of options to intensify or redevelop underutilized sites. The challenge of the housing affordability crisis is also somewhat offset by the fact that it creates an opportunity to incorporate market residential uses in mixed use facilities. And as market residential uses become more and more valuable, they're more and more able to offset either non-profitable or in some cases non-revenue generating uses. And in addition, there's the opportunity to demonstrate the types of development that the city wants to see moving forward and chart the path towards what the city envisions itself being in 5, 10, or 20 years.
Okay, Tywin, before we get into the quantified engagement, what I'm going to suggest, we're going to take the group through a polling exercise to get a better understanding of your ideas and opinions with regards to some key questions. But I think at this point, why don't we open the floor for any questions or comments on the presentation that you've just heard.
Okay, thanks, Rowan. I don't know if we can see if anyone has. So right now we're just looking for questions, not comments about what we've seen, but just questions specifically to the matter. We will be going to an in-camera piece that will include some other specifics. So I don't want to get into any of the specifics that you may have seen related to property matters here. So Councillor Kushner, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have is, in the examples you've shown, would they, for the most part, be one-tier, single-tier level of governments compared to what we have here? We have an upper and lower tier, and we're the lower tier.
I think there are examples of both. Certainly, the city of Waterloo is a second tier or lower tier municipality, as is the city of Burlington. And interestingly enough, both of those deal with their municipal development corporations as internal to governments. They don't have separate outside corporations. I think the rest of them, Tywin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, But certainly Toronto, Hamilton, Calgary, Edmonton are all single-tier municipalities.
Right. Okay, my next question is, you've indicated one of the advantages of the corporation would be to separate the planning and approval authority. What does that mean? Does that mean the planning by the city is expedited?
It could be.
Approvals are expedited?
It could be. I think it's important to recognize that when the city is doing its own planning and development, there's, when it's developing sites and then rezoning and creating OP amendments for its own site, I think there's a potential for not necessarily a legal conflict of interest, but certainly a conflict in terms of the objectives of planning versus the objectives of the municipality as a developer. So if the planning department has got a defined mandate to expedite certain types of development, whether it be by your own development corporation or by a private developer, then in that case, it could be expedited.
And can it not be expedited without an outside corporation?
It could very well be expedited without an outside development corporation. I think the advantage of an outside corporation is that it has more flexibility in terms of identifying potential partners, negotiating with potential partners, and potentially defining deals with potential partners without having to get council approval at every stage. And by the, when council has to look at it, it's looking at it as something that's very close to a finished product or a deal that's ready to be consummated, as opposed to having to deal with it as that deal is being created.
And my last question is, you mentioned that we have vacant municipal office space, and you've also referred to our heritage buildings not being used as well as they could be. What specifically would you have done with our vacant municipal space and also our heritage buildings?
So that'll be a part of our in-camera discussion, Councillor.
Well, why is that, Mr. Mayor? It's a question that should be out in the public. What could they do better without getting into any specifics?
We'll ask that question when we come out of in-camera then, because there is a discussion about the property. So if you can respect the fact that there will be an in-camera one that does deal with properties, I think that matter is either best dealt with after that discussion or as part of the in-camera discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Garcia, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Tywin and Rowan for an excellent detailed presentation. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. You have identified some of the development.
Councillor, so if you have, these are questions, not comments. If you could ask questions of the presenters, you just indicate.
Mr. Mayor, Rowan asked for questions or comments.
No, we're asking for questions right here, Councillor.
Okay, that's not what he asked for, but.
Oh, sir.
I'm
I
the
think
chair.
I've been overruled by the mayor.
Okay.
You have questions of the presenter, Councillor. Councillor, do you have questions of the presenter?
No, Mr. Mayor, I said I had some comments because that's what he requested.
Thank you. Okay, so is there any further questions before we go in camera? Councillor Phillips.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions. First one, for sure, you can answer. The second one, I don't know if we'll have to go in camera for it or not. But anyways, as far as organizing the staffing that's required to administer this program, you're saying that it's basically done all in-house. We're not going to be having to hire outside consultants, maybe to your company to give us an annual report card of how we're doing. But other than that, it's done with our senior staff. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. I mean, senior staff could be assisted by outside consultants depending on the project. So, you know, for example, if you had a project that required, you know, significant design expertise that wasn't available in-house, or potentially architectural expertise, you may have to hire outside expertise depending on the specific project. You know, generally the organization would run itself, you know, through your staff or through the MDC staff, but that doesn't mean that there may be outside expertise that may be required on a one-off basis from, you know, depending on the type of development that you were doing.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, and again, I don't know if this has to be taken in camera, but I'll throw it out anyways, and you can tell me, Mr. Mayor, you can rule on it. Given the properties that the city presently owns without having to purchase any property, is it a viable project?
Well, I think that, I mean, that's something that we'll be providing in our final report. My first inclination is yes. I think there's enough projects and enough potential to have some sort of entity, whether it be internal or whether it be a, you know, a separate municipal development corporation. But I think there is enough potential within the city, and there are enough vacant parcels that have, you know, some pretty good opportunities in them.
That's without purchasing.
Without purchasing, yes.
With the other projects that you have, or other cities that you've done this similar exercise with, have they actually gone out and purchased land, large tracts of land, in order to develop it themselves?
Yeah, in the case of Burlington, and I'm not sure what status they're in right now, they were looking at acquiring a surplus school site, and they had a vision for a development on that.
Right. Yeah, that would be a good opportunity. Okay, thank you very much for those questions, for those answers. I guess I gave the questions.
Thank you, Councillor. So I don't see any further, unless I'm missing someone. I don't see any further hands up. So with that, I think we can do the in-camera piece, and then if
actually, Mr. Mayor, we were going to go through the polling section right now, and then we would go into the in-camera. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn the spotlight back on to Tywin, who will talk about how the polling system works.
So yeah, we just have a couple questions before the in-camera portion, just to kind of give everyone a feel for how the polling works. And it's not meant to, you know, no one is providing a final opinion on anything. It's just to demonstrate kind of the consensus of everyone that's here, and the general feeling about certain concepts. If you have either a smartphone handy, or you can open another browser window on your computer, depending on your current situation, and go to rwpoll.com.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to mention that the polling is completely anonymous, so that the you know, we can't identify any specific results with any particular person, and that's the only way they'll be presented, so that regardless of how you vote, we won't be able to attribute a specific vote to a specific person.
Yeah, so if you visit rwpoll.com, you'll have a little page such as this that will appear on your phone or computer. And when you get there, you can enter St Cath 1 in that session ID little entryway there. And then that will bring you to a tab which does ask for you to provide information. You do not have to do so. You can just click join, and it is set, as Rowan said, to anonymous, so we can't see anyone's information even if you do choose to enter it, but you do not have to. It will allow you to participate regardless.
Any counselors are having troubles, just put up your hand and we can figure it out.
I would just a point of clarification. This is for council and staff or council only?
Council and staff.
Okay. And could a member of the public be following along and also enter our polling, or is it restricted to our use?
I
I think the intent is for council and staff, rather than the public, but I don't think there's a way of blocking the public from doing it.
Okay.
No, which was part of the impetus for the in-camera portion.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just going to wait until we have a few more people join. Again, if you do have any issues connecting, please let me know. I can see there's 10 people connected right now.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. It says session ID.
Yep.
Can someone type in the chat what the session ID is, because I missed it.
So it's on the screen there. It's STCATH1.
Okay, sorry, I'm on my phone. This is my computer. I can't.
Okay, so it's capital ST, capital C, small a, small t, small h, and 1.
Thank you.
When I go to the site, I don't see the hello as the first. So I go to the site, and then when do I type in St. Catharines 1, St. Cath 1?
Councillor Kushner, what do you see when you go to rwpoll.com?
Okay, I see a participant. Is that the one I go to?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, it's so small I can't see.
Is this what we should be? Is this where we should be? This site here?
Yep, that looks correct.
Thank you.
It's not designed to show the PowerPoint slides very well, but it will show when we get to the polling questions, all of the options will appear on your phone there.
Thank you.
Okay, well, so I have 16 people now, so that's approaching everyone that is here. If anyone doesn't want to participate, that is an option as well. But if you could let us know so we know to move on, that would be great.
I think it's probably easier if, is there anybody here who wants to participate that isn't able to get on or hasn't gotten on yet?
Councillor Dodge's hand is up.
Okay.
With mine, I have that screen up there now. Is that where I should be?
Yep, that is correct.
And then where do I go from there? Or just leave it?
Just leave it.
It will be evident when we move to a question that it'll give you some obvious kind of potential answers that you can select from.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't go to the hello screen.
Did you go to www.rwpoll.com, Joe?
Yes.
I went right to the hello screen after that.
I'll try again.
Yeah, and please ensure that it's .com, not .ca, because I think in Canada it's exclusively a student-based platform, so it might give you some different options.
I've got www.rwpoll.com.
You just touch that and it should take you to hello.
I'm not getting that.
Okay, what I could also suggest is if anybody's having trouble logging on, they can always send me via chat their response, and I'll keep it confidential.
Sure.
But then we'll be able to add that total to the chart or to the poll. So why don't we move on? And I said, if you were having trouble getting on, just email me your response and I'll keep a note of them. Okay, so the first question really sort of polls you to provide an understanding of what you think the best strategies would be for the city to consider with some of their surplus or underutilized sites. And this is more just a more general opinion in terms of, you know, how detailed or how involved the city should be involved in terms of disposing or using its underutilized sites. So as a planner, which is really what its current policy, what its current practice is now, would be to prepare secondary plans or to potentially entertain official plan amendments or rezonings, you know, as a partner potentially within partnering with a private sector developer, being the developer itself. So, you know, taking the project to the point of actually developing it, going one step further and developing it and retaining it, say, for example, as a property manager, or even just as leasing the land on a long-term basis to a developer. And finally, in terms of, you know, an end user, although I'm not, Tyler, what do we mean by end user?
Where there are municipal uses incorporated in that final project.
Okay.
You talk about a secondary plan, but that of course would refer to very large pieces of developable property.
Yeah, no, exactly. So if it was a larger property, the city could prepare a secondary plan or could prepare potential official plan amendments for it, or it may be a secondary plan that encompasses a larger area that has municipal properties on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just I'm going to jump. So just so you know, this is what it's showing up on the iPhone. That there's a little split screen.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That, as I said, the iPhone doesn't show this screen very well, but when we get to the polling question,
that's my Mac showing the same. Okay,
that's fine. That's fine. When we get to the polling question, you'll see it'll work fine. It's just it doesn't present the actual PowerPoint slides very well through the program. So here's the polling question. So Tywin, how many responses can they pick?
One response for this question, because this is the first one. So we're just going to test everyone's responses.
I don't want to be picky, but you're using the word strategies, which is plural, and then you got to make one choice.
Yes.
Kind of doesn't make sense. Okay, thank you.
You should have been a teacher, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we actually,
Bill.
we actually tried to clean up the grammar as well as we could, and we had, you know, a fair bit of assistance from city staff as well too. But you know, sometimes things get missed.
I have 10 responses from 19 people as of right now.
Do we have to hit enter or anything? Because I just clicked it and it didn't do anything.
If you've selected one, it'll indicate that response, and you can change your response up until polling is closed, which I will do when we get 19 responses.
You just hit the little blue arrow on the right side of the box, right?
Correct.
Mark me down as F, all of the above.
Okay.
Well, I can say mark me down as B. Thank you.
So is anyone unable to respond for any reason?
Okay, so why don't we close the poll? We have one additional B and one additional F. Actually, what is F?
All of the above.
It was
Oh,
joking.
okay. Okay,
So that's what our outputs look like. Just as an example of you can see how many people responded to each of those options.
okay. So obviously sell sites with conditions to achieve city goals. And there's actually 5 because we had one write-in vote. Okay, Tywin, let's move to the next question.
I think, and Rowan, in the interest of time, it might be best to move to the second slide deck.
So move to the in-camera session. Okay.
All right. Thank you for that. So again, the reason why we're going in camera is that there is some site-specific discussions that need to take place. And since there is no decision of council on these matters to date, it would be premature to publicly talk about potential uses. And this is the reason. So I'll turn it over to the clerk, and the clerk can provide the direction as to closed session. But again, from a public facing perspective, we're talking about hypotheticals about specific properties. And so it's important that we bring that in camera to have those discussions. So I'll go over to the clerk for the official recognition of in camera.
So the reason to go into closed session today is to discuss the Municipal Land Development Corporation workshop and site-specific development opportunities. This closed session presentation would be pursuant to Municipal Act Section 239 3.1, Education or Training, as well as Section 239 2K, which is a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. Again, we are looking at future site-specific development opportunities there. By attending the closed session, each member acknowledges that their obligations under the Code of Conduct, including responsibilities related to confidentiality of the closed session materials and discussions, remain the same as if they were physically present at the meeting. This includes that members are not permitted to record the proceedings and must ensure that no other person can see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place.
All right, thank you to the deputy clerk. So I just need a motion to go in camera. And I got Councillor McPherson and Councillor Littleton, and all in favor of in camera. Okay, that's carried. So the deputy clerk will take us over, or the council coordinator. Okay, Evan, just signal when we're live again so we can capture it for.
Yeah, we're good. Anytime you are.
Okay. So we've just come out of in camera. There was a discussion that was taking place pursuant to Education section of Municipal Act 23931 and 2392K. And that's regarding a position plan procedure, criteria, instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on behalf of the municipality or local board. So we received information from Urban Metrics as part of a presentation, and the motion is just to receive the presentation provided by Urban Metrics. And I'll need a motion on that. Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Porter. All in favor of receiving those? And that's carried. And then we just have a reading of the bylaws, but before we do that, I'll go to either Councillor or Director York or CAO Oakes in terms of the next steps, so that we as council can understand where we are on this pathway.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank Tywin and Rowan for the presentations. In terms of next steps, they're going to garner this feedback, generate a final report that will be circulated to staff to generate a staff report, and then we'll present to council.
Do we have any pathway forward and timeline? Like so we're in June now.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe we're targeting the July meeting of council, so that's that last summer session before we break.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a bylaw, and the bylaw is to confirm the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on June 9th. That's today. And so I just need a motion to see that or approve that bylaw. Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Littleton. And all in favor? Thank you. Councillor Garcia, got a final question before adjournment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to the clerk or the deputy clerk, if we have a presentation and a staff report on this in July, given that it's an election year, would we be in a position to make a decision regarding something like this?
Through the chair, there's nothing in the Municipal Act that would restrict council to make a decision on this item.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And a motion to adjourn. Again, thank you very much to Urban Metrics, Councillor Littleton, Councillor Kushner, and great presentation. Thank you very much. All in favor? And that's carried. Have a great evening.